I never thought of not being a musician. It never occurred to me to do anything else. I started on trumpet because my dad played trumpet and my older brother plays trumpet. But after a couple of years, I switched over to electric bass. And right away, I started doing gigs, and playing in a band, and we would play the typical high school dances and fairs and, silly gigs. But they were gigs, and I was in sixth, seventh grade. Music was always tied to the performance of it. It wasn't just about practicing, even though I did naturally enjoy practicing and being in the room by myself and trying to get better. But it was, for me, it was really directly tied always to playing with other musicians. First my brothers, and then, a band, and getting paid to play, I think because I had that connection with the performance of it so early, I never really imagined anything else. The arc of, my musical life was very clear. It's like, okay, play with them, learn from them, play with somebody else and learn something from them. Learn tunes, learn the dialogue, the conversation that happens, learn my instrument, because I was taking private lessons at the same time. I was progressing at a fairly rapid rate. I gotta say, it's just been that constant thing of I've never had any other job. I've never thought about having another job. I didn't really have a defining moment or person that was kind of guiding. There were many. All the people I got to play with. And then I got to see great musicians play live too. I got to see Ray Brown, I got to see Ron Carter, and many, many people. And that was super inspiring. But really what was inspiring me was this constant situation that I was in of really not having it together yet and trying to get it better. Try to each gig to learn something, and so next time I played with them, I was just to be able to fit in a bit more comfortably. So that was my learning process. I'd say it was 90% osmosis. Because I was playing with older musicians who, that's how they didn't verbalize things. They taught you through the music. And either you were ready to take it in and understand it, or it went over your head and you missed it that time, and hopefully you had another chance. But very rarely would somebody sit you down and say, you should be playing this on this type of tune. It really didn't happen very often. If they did verbalize something, it would often be kind of in code, so that you would take it in, but the meaning, it might change over time as I matured and say, oh yeah, now I see what they're talking about. So it would mean something at first, and then maybe a year later it'd say, oh yeah, that makes sense. I think the whole thing has changed a bit with jazz education, because now we're in environments where we sit down and talk about every little detail of what makes up jazz music. And that was completely not the case for me. My brother, Phil, who plays trumpet, he had gotten into jazz a few years before me, so he had all these great records, and I was listening to, Miles and Coltrane and Horace Silver, all, the obvious classic ones. And that's kind of why I switched to upright bass, was that I was hearing this sound that was not electric bass. I didn't really even think about, well, what is it? And then finally I was like, okay, what instrument is that? So I was able to borrow a bass from school and, just try to play along with records and play with my brothers and learn tunes, learn the repertoire, and see people play live. But a lot of it came from records, a lot of it just listening to records. Some of it was luck. Like when you get a record as a kid, it's sometimes just like the cover attracts you or something. It's not like I knew who some of these people were, but luckily I bought the record, and I'm really glad I did. I made some good choices without even knowing it. Mingus and Sam Jones and Oscar Pettiford, these people I kind of got into pretty early just by chance. Nobody really told me to listen to them. But then I was listening to all the contemporary bass players. This is in the 80s, so I was listening to all the great bass players that were really active then, Mark Johnson and George Mraz and Eddie Gomez and Dave Holland, and tons of them. So it was always kind of this balance. I didn't think of it like that, but looking back, it was a balance of contemporary, modern bass players, and then all the, the great historic bass players. What I think I can give to students is this other way of learning that is not as common now as it used to be. If I'm dealing with bass players, there's always a lot of technical, physical stuff I can talk about with the instrument. What I typically do with a lot of lessons is I'm playing. I'm really kind of playing the whole day. So I'm trying to teach people the way that I was taught, by giving them ideas through the music, showing them potential through the music. It used to be that was how everybody learned how to play music, was more of an apprentice situation. If we are going to be in an academic environment like this, I think we have to somehow bring in the reality of what makes a musician hireable, like a working musician. It can't just be theoretic or academic. So I always try to make the analog of what it takes to actively be playing with a lot of different musicians, and to make the bass a part of the music and an active part of the music, and to have the technique to express yourself clearly in a lot of different musical situations, and to be ready for what might come based on my experience as a working bass player. I always look for somebody who's inquisitive, who's searching, this is the time to search. And so to be really actively questioning things and looking for possibilities in the music. An ideal student, in a way, is kind of like the ideal musician that you play with, that they're actively listening as much as possible, and that there's a flow to the lesson, so that it may not go the way I imagined it. It goes its own organic way based on the student's needs, the time of day, everything that makes the differences happen, like on a gig. So it's dynamic. And so I guess I want a student who is aware of that, and it goes with the flow of the lesson. The great thing about this school is that there's all sorts of different types of teachers going on. There's some like me who come throughout the year irregularly, and then there's some who come once a month for a week, and then there's some who are every week. So yeah, I think that's really good for the student. I wouldn't want a whole school to be made up of teachers like me, But I think, the combination of all those things really make for, it gives the student a possibility to work in different ways with different teachers. And we all are coming from different places. And Bernard is super open to this kind of combination of different ways of teaching, and the different time schedules that we're all on, and that we're all active musicians. And he trusts that by creating this environment, the students are going to get a wide idea of what the potential is to be a jazz musician today. Yeah, it's a constant balance, and it's not super easy. It's a lot of movement. I'm playing with one group for a week or two, then I'm going to something completely different musically, and I have to kind of quickly refocus my attention to that. It's gotten a bit easier more recently where I'm not like doing tons of different things. I'm mostly playing with some of the same groups. When I first came to New York, I think it was a bit more scattered. I was just trying to play with a lot of different musicians and get a sense of what I wanted to get out of the music. And now it's a bit more selective. It's not easy, and then you try to be home and be a family man and be a father and a husband. But I'm not complaining, because I feel really fortunate to be able to make music with a lot of great musicians. And going back to what we talked about at the very beginning, that was the only thing I ever wanted to do as a bass player, was play with great musicians. And it's just, that's what I've been able to do. So I feel really lucky with that. Once you get to a certain point in your musical career, everybody plays well, but then you're looking for people who share your musical values and your ideas of what music means. And, in that sort of atmosphere, you can just really enjoy it and make music that's very personal and creative and stretching and all the great things that we look for in jazz music. I don't have that many actually exercises that I give the students for time beyond certain technical things that I think will help them with coordination. I didn't practice all the time with a metronome, that's for sure, growing up. I mean, I think you have to balance it because, practicing with a metronome, you can depend on it, and then obviously it's not there when you do a gig. I would practice with putting the metronome on different parts of the beat. I mean, the obvious ones, putting different parts of the beat, 2 and 4 on and a 4 on different, things that make it harder to keep up. Playing with different tempi, I think, was really helpful for me, and to get comfortable playing really slow and playing really fast. There's the technical side of producing a sound that's clear so that other people have a clear understanding of where my beat is. If I'm not playing clearly, it's all kind of shady, and it doesn't really matter if I have good time or not, because it's the notes not being clearly stated. So there's all the technical parts of playing bass that make up that clarity of sound. I remember being really hung up at a certain point about, where am I placing the beat? Is it in the center? Is it behind the beat? Is it ahead of the beat? I mean, and it's really elusive, because I think all musicians have had that experience where you're playing a gig and it feels, for example, like the drummer is playing way on top of the beat. And you come off stage and you say to the drummer, wow, it felt really like you're playing really on top. And the drummer says, wow, it sounded like you were really on top. Like totally two different ideas, of the same musical situation. So it's pretty elusive sometimes. And, you record yourself to see what's accurate. What I'm noticing with students is that a lot of times it's a technical issue, that there's somehow between the coordination of the two hands, there's a flub in the beat. It's not necessarily that they have bad time, So there's those technical aspects to deal with. And then it's just like, how do you make it feel good? And for me, it was by playing with great drummers and experiencing why that felt good, and playing along with records, which is a great way to experience that if you don't have it right there in front of you. For me, time is hard to talk about in some ways unless you're talking about metronomic time. It's like, it's either right or wrong. With other beats, you listen to these great records and it's like, it moves, or, it could be, the beat can be really big and everybody's kind of playing somewhere in that beat, different places, but it feels really great. It's kind of hard to recreate that. You just kind of go for the sound of it. And that's kind of how I did it. And, the other teacher here, Jeff Ballard, is a drummer that I've been playing with since I was, a teenager. So we've used to talk about it and listen to a lot of music together and think about it. And it's funny, like sometimes we'll get together teaching in a class, and if we say we're going to try to, Jeff's going to play on top of the beat, and I'm going to play behind the beat. If you try to do that, it never really works out so well because it's never so clear cut. There's always a movement. So it's really kind of hard to put it in a laboratory and dissect it. This aspect of jazz really has to be learned by playing gigs and stuff like this. And it's not, even though it's come from dance music, it's lost that aspect of it, but it still has to feel like it's dance music. And so no matter what part of time you're working on, I hope at the forefront of everybody's mind is still that it has to feel like we're moving forward and that there's a forward momentum and a dance beat to it. Certain things you have to practice, to get together, get it under your fingers. What I always hope to be is in a musical environment where you can practice on the gig. And Brad's thing, it's been really a lot of that because we, even though we've played so much together, we've really rehearsed very little. The rehearsing has been done on the gig. So we try to get the music to a certain point that it's not going to fall apart. But then it's really trying to explore the potential of the music in performance. If you share a lot of musical ideas together, you can kind of have all these different ideas going on rhythmically, but we agree on the center of where the center is. And then we kind of go off in our own universes and come together and go out again, go in and out. And that's a dynamic that it's really fun for the musician, but I think it's interesting for the listener too, because it's a conversation on multiple levels, of rhythmic and harmonic and melodic. You can kind of watch the play of it where it's kind of childlike in a way. It's like, here, check this out. No, check this out. No, check this out. It's not ego-driven, but it's just like musical ideas that are being passed around. And then it's like, yeah. And then you take that and you run with it. And then, so it's this constant movement of ideas. And I love that because it's, because it's playful, because it's still, you share this big beat. I think this is part of the issue of if you just think of time as metronomic, it becomes a lot less playful. And then once you see a bigger picture of the beat or more conceptual idea maybe of time, then it's like there's always the play in it, which is, for me, part of the dance. Because I'm playing it fundamentally an acoustic instrument, I work on my sound acoustically. And I think, and just technically, like what we were talking about earlier about clarity and being able to speak on your instrument clearly. The more I've worked on that, the easier it is to play in a variety of sound situations. Sometimes there's not much you can do, but hopefully you're playing with really talented, sensitive musicians who are also reacting to the same room and then are acting accordingly, so that it makes it easier because we're all trying to make it work. You have to play different every night, and that's something that's hard to teach in school, that you have to experience night after night and playing a certain repertoire over the course of a tour and making it work in a variety of situations. I mean, we do the best we can. I mean, I wouldn't want to, in the middle of a gig, just say, it's not going to happen. You give up, because people who come to the show don't know that, and they've paid money to see it. Sometimes it sounds better out in front than it sounds on stage. Sometimes it sounds a lot better on stage than it sounds out front. You just, there's a bit of trust involved. It's hard. That's a hard part, that I don't think a lot of people realize, is that we're dealing with some tricky sound situations often. It's both. It's everything is happening. I mean, I always think it would be so amazing to have, our brains hooked up to some machine that would show us what we're focusing in on in the course of an evening of music, because it's constantly moving. Your focus is moving, just like, I guess, an audience member, your focus is moving. I'm constantly shifting, like, let's say with Brad's trio, for example, between Brad and Jeff, some of the aspects that I'm listening to with both instruments are the same, is the time feel good between all three of us? Are we in the same place on the harmonically and texturally? Is the overall sound happening to my ears? But then also listening on a very micro level of what cymbal is Jeff playing on? Is Brad playing a root in his left hand? All the little things that will affect what I play and how I play it. I'm always trying to make the bass speak in the music, and all those things will affect it. I think my focus is just constantly in flux, and also my focus is to be creatively inspired by it, and that's the other thing that happens with touring, it's like you don't always feel like playing every night. Creatively, you might be kind of beat down. So for me, the solution to that is always being open, listening to what everybody else is playing, so that relights that spark of creativity. As a jazz musician, you have to take what you learn in school, but then you have to be actively involved in the music. You have to be playing with people. You have to be performing in front of people. With jazz, it's really essential that they put into practice the group dialogue that is essential to the music, so that we're playing with each other and it feels good, and that we're all listening to each other. And the quicker that can be balanced with the academic side, I think that's going to make them quickly move through their learning process. It's a real shifting time, and I think it's a little awkward for a lot of musicians and scary to think about, like, wow, I've just gone to college for 4 years or 6 years, and now what's the next step? As long as the next step is to continue to get better, and to get better by playing with other musicians, and to become a musician that other people want to make music with, then they're cool. I mean, I always think about New York, because New York is by far the city with the most jazz musicians. But there's never too many. There are never too many, because there's always room for another good one. And I've seen it in the 25 years that I've been there, that it's never like the slot is filled and there's no more room. It's like, oh wow, this guy can really play. Thank God. Come on and let's play. So I think that has to be considered. That's the end game, is to be a musician that people want to make music with, because you help them to sound better. So if that's kind of at the foundation of all our learning as we go through school, then you don't have to worry about, like, playing in every style and playing in every time, every meter, and you just have to be really good at what you do well. Take in all the information, and then be an active student, and process it in your own way, and be inspired by what people are telling you, but make it your own. Be your own teacher, have great teachers, be an active musician, always working on your music to develop your instrument, to push your instrument forward. I think that's the constant that hasn't changed in the last 100 years, of the music. So I mean, I think that's kind of reassuring in this age of being overwhelmed, is that some things are the same. And some things, as a musician, I know that I'm looking for certain things that a young musician can do that'll help me to play better. So those things are the same.